Hola mis amores, it's your girl Yelena La Rosa, and this is my first episode for my video journal series titled Behind the Music, My Journey with God. And the title for this first episode is called Starting Over with God. I, you know, if there's a lot of pauses, it's because I'm just like processing my thoughts. I really felt like I needed to do this because I wanted to be able to speak on things that have been on my heart for a while and to kind of share a bit about who I am outside of the music, but also speaking about my newfound relationship with God. For those who don't know, last year I experienced a major car accident that pretty much was kind of like a near death experience, I guess you could say. And then in the accident, I would say after the accident, I really started to reflect on myself, my life, and also my purpose. And that's where I really started to think about God again. And, I really started to just think about like everything that we've done, everything that we've accomplished in regards to music. What's the purpose of it all, right? And I've always believed that I've always had that my purpose on this earth is to do music, is to be a singer. But I know there's more to that. There's more than just being a singer and doing music. You know what I'm saying? And after I had the accident, which happened last year in August 26th, I really just started to like look within. And that's when God came into play. And this year was when I really started to take seriously of like, what does God want me to do when it comes to my life, when it comes to my music career, and how does that look like? And what do I need to give up? What I need to surrender to when it comes to Him? So it's been quite a journey, and I just felt like I'm in this place where I just want to talk about it, because maybe this could help someone, or maybe, I don't know. I don't have any expectations when it comes to doing this, but I just also felt like God was nudging me to speak, give my testimony, if you like to say, or shall I say it? Because I dealt with a lot of things as I've been working on my music career, you know. But that being said, this is behind the scenes, and I just want to share with y'all, what's been happening, outside of music. So, first and foremost, I want to thank God for pushing me on doing this, for pushing me to speak up a bit more and not worry about performing, When it comes to my music career, which I started in 2020 for those who don't know, music has always been my first love, as I like to say, since I was a kid. I was able to you know, recognize that I had a gift when I was about 6 or 7. And all of that started because one day my dad decides to buy me the Selena movie. And at the time, I didn't know who Selena was. I wasn't alive when she was alive. I wasn't alive when she died either. So until this day, I still remember how that felt when I watched the movie, and how inspired I felt, and how I just, after watching the movie, that's when I began to recognize, like, I had a love for music and I had a gift for it too, and that I wanted to be a singer. And, I thank God and my dad, for using, Selena to kind of inspire, and help me recognize, what my calling is, right? At the time. But fast forward to now, it's been quite a journey. So this year, I decided to rebrand myself into a Latin soul Christian artist. Moving forward, I want to do music that's faith-based, music that glorifies God, music that just, at the end of the day is inspirational and it's healing. And at the end of the day, it's music that gives light on God and his kingdom. And I want God to use me, because I know that's the reason why I'm here on this earth. That's the reason why he gave me the gifts that he gave me. And this year, I was in this place of rediscovery, of pretty much starting over with God, and just tapping in and just pretty much like building my relationship with him and asking him, like, okay, I given back my career to you. I decided that we are going to rebrand ourselves as a Latin soul Christian artist. Moving forward, we're no longer going to be creating secular music. And we want to include you in everything that we do. Not just in our music career, but also in our personal life. So what do I have to do? And I definitely say throughout this whole entire year, I was going through this sanctification. I think that's how you say it. Period. Where God was just working in me, pruning me, making me realize what were the things that for the longest time I was prioritizing. And I'll tell you that the biggest thing that I always was driven by, especially since I was a kid, was wanting to be successful. I always like told myself, like, all I care about is wanting to be successful. All I care about is working hard and, someday being wealthy, someday being, famous or whatever it may be, but just being successful overall. That's really the biggest thing that I was driven by after all this time. And I used to say that nothing else matters but being successful. Like I was a girl that, I think girls normally when they're growing up, they think about wanting to marry someday and, meeting the love of their life and having their dream wedding and all that kind of stuff. And for me, I thought about that stuff, but it was kind of like secondary. Like I didn't really put too much focus on that. My priority was my goals, my career, my desires, and success. And I think for some time I was being led by that, to where, And I'm saying there's nothing wrong with working hard, but there has to be a balance. And when you are in a place where you begin to incorporate God in everything that you do, especially when it comes to your goals, right? Because as they say, God put that dream in your heart for a reason, right? But because God put that dream in your heart for a reason, it does not mean that, okay, I'm gonna do everything on my own accord. I'm gonna be led by myself. I'm gonna I'm not gonna include God in anything. I'm gonna glorify myself, I'm gonna give myself all the credit, etc. Like, God gave you that dream. He put that dream in your heart for a reason. And He wants you to surrender the dream to Him so that He can guide you on, on that path to achieving your dream, right? And that's something that I didn't realize, because I will be honest, so a little background in regards to like church and God. So I grew up Catholic at first and then Christian. Like, I was baptized as a child, like as a baby in a Catholic church. And then for some time I was going to Catholic church with my parents, especially when we moved to Florida. I moved to Florida when I was 5 from Boston. And I grew up pretty much in Florida majority of my childhood. And I also did my first communion and everything. So it's like I kind of had an idea of who God was, but then, no offense, but when it comes to Catholicism, I think Catholicism doesn't really teach you on how to have a relationship with God compared to Christianity. And at the end of the day, religion's religion, but the biggest thing when it comes to God is God wants to have a relationship with you. And so I kind of knew that as a kid, but at the same time, I really didn't. So when I was in middle and high school, my parents ended up changing to a Christian church when we moved back to Boston. And then from there, that's when I was kind of searching and wanting to learn more about God, wanting to study the Bible, wanting to get rebaptized, get baptized, as a teenager. And that led into even when I was in college. But I was in this place of like, I felt like for some time, I had to give up my music or my dreams in order to get closer with God. And that's where I kind of felt like, I don't know. Because in my mind, I was like, why would you want me to give up my dreams and desires in order to get closer to you? When these dreams and desires, I'm pretty sure they come from you, because there's a reason why they're in my heart, on my mind, And I didn't really understand, at the time, like, God doesn't want you to give up your dreams, your goals, your desires. He just wants to make sure that you don't put those dreams and desires over Him. Because if you do, it gets to the point where you're going to end up idolizing those dreams and those desires. And that's what happened with me. I began to idolize, success. Especially with Selena being my inspiration since I was a child, I even began to idolize her. Where it got to the point where whenever I've done interviews or I talked to people about where my love for music came from, I gave Selena the credit. When in reality, I should have given God the credit. You know what I'm saying? Because God was the reason, God introduced me to Selena through my dad, And I know it's weird to say it, but because I know there's tons of girls that were inspired by Selena once they watched the movie or listened to her music. But I know for sure that I was introduced to Selena for a reason, because it sparked you know, inspiration. And it made me recognize at a young age what my dreams are, what I'm meant to do, on this earth. Even though at the time I didn't really recognize it, but I recognized that I had a gift at such a young age, even though I didn't really know how to use it, properly. For some time, I didn't really get educated on how to sing properly, and I've had people throughout my career that have, even life, that have given me feedback in regards to my voice and, said I have a good voice, a bad voice, or whatever it may be, or I need to work on this, work on that. So I never really learned how to really properly like sing, but at the end of the day, I knew what I wanted to do was sing. And for some time I was giving Selena the credit, and just thanking her and being like, oh, if it wasn't, for her, blah, 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 like if it wasn't for my dad buying the Selena movie, I wouldn't, but I was like, no, we got to give God the credit. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have recognized what my gifts were, what my calling was, etc. And this is not to say anything bad in regards to Selena. I love Selena with all my heart, even though I never met her, but I know her story is so impactful and so inspirational, and I am so heartbroken, when I think about her what happened to her. But it's just heartbreaking, but nonetheless, like her story lives on, and so does her spirit, and her light, but yeah, it's just like, you got to be careful of idolizing. God doesn't want you to make idolize things, make things into idols, especially your dreams and your desires, whatever they may be. And that's what I did. So that was one of the biggest things that God made me recognize this year, was like, you need to stop idolizing. You got to let go and surrender your goals and your dreams to me. And you got to let go of your inspirations, which was Selena. You got to let go of that. She's someone that you look as a role model, you got to let her go, And that's what I did. I even had pictures in my room of like Selena, because I would use as an inspiration, right? Like mood boards, vision boards. Like in my room, I have a vision board of like Grammy Awards and all this type of stuff, things that I desire to, one day I desire to be a Grammy Award winning, artist, And I ended up taking those pictures down in my room. And the biggest thing that was a huge push for me, but also I was just like, how am I going to do this, was when I decided to take a step back from social media and give it back to God. And when I decided to obviously give back my career to him. That was the biggest, I think that was the hardest thing for me to do, But that was part of the process, In order for me to surrender to God and to really make sure that I was in alignment with him so that he could use me, completely, So that being said, I ended up taking a break from social media starting August, ended up coming back recently. And during this time that I was away, there was a lot that God put in my heart. And that's when I was like, yeah, I think it's time for us to really begin to share what's been happening behind the scenes. It's time for us to really begin to talk about what God has been doing, you know, what God has been making us realize when it comes to us, when it comes to our career, you know. And it's just time overall to just talk about our struggles as well too. Talk about things that, you know, I went through while I've been working on my music career, you know, and how some of those things kind of resurfaced this year. Because this year for me, I felt like besides work on my relationship with God, but because of God, this year was really the first time where I really felt like I was beginning to heal from a lot of traumas that I dealt with since I was a kid, but also as a young adult, you know, as an adult, you know. And because of that, there was a lot of things that were kind of resurfacing, things that were suppressed for so long that God was kind of bringing into light, you know, and that needed to be handled and prayed over and then surrendered to God and just so I could continue to be healed, you know, continue to heal and restored, you know. And because of that too, this year was the year for sure that I was in a place of like not only restoration but also recovery, you know, to where in every single aspect I felt different. My body, my mind, emotionally, like every single aspect, I just felt so different, you know. But I think a lot of it has to do with me changing, you know, in regards to God and, you know, and me letting go of who I was before God and me being transformed into my new identity in Him, right? And, you know, I'm looking forward to talking more to y'all about what's been happening, you know, and to share a bit about me. Because for the longest time, especially when you see me on social media, I just always felt like I had to perform. I always felt like I had to make sure I looked good, make sure I was, you know, doing things video-wise or content-wise to make sure, you know, it was marketable. And I was like, I don't care about that stuff anymore. I just want to be able to just talk and not care about how I look or how I'm dressed or, you know, I just want to be me, you know. And not saying that when I'm performing, I'm not me, but it's kind of like, here's the artist and here's the person, you know what I'm saying? And I'm just in a place where it's like, I just don't want to perform anymore. I just want to be myself. I just want to be open and honest, because that's the biggest thing I was learning this year when it comes to God, is being more open and honest with myself, with others. And I just want God to just, you know, to help me with that, you know, as time goes on, and so that He can use me. You know what I'm saying? In order for God to use you, you have to be in a place of not only surrender, but being willing to be used by Him, you know, being vulnerable, being open, you know. And that's the biggest thing that I, you know, been working on this year, you know. So that being said, there's more videos to come. Please subscribe, like this video, comment, share with whoever you feel that, you know, whoever may be in alignment with everything I spoke about, you know, or is in a place where they're wanting to learn about God and they're wanting to seek Him more, but they don't know where to start. Because at the end of the day, like I said, and what I've learned as I've been working on my relationship with God this year, it's not about me anymore. You know, it's not about what I've always dreamt about, my desires, you know. It's about God and His mission, you know, and what He's always wanted me to do. you know, and about helping people. And that's the place where I'm at. I don't know what's going to happen exactly in my career. I don't know how things will turn out, but I just know with God, anything is possible. And I know that no matter what, I may have had a plan, but his plan is much greater than mine. And he definitely showed me that this year for sure. That his plans are much greater than the plans that you had for yourself. And I'm looking forward to seeing his plans unfold, you know? So until next time, make sure y'all continue to tune in, and new music will be coming out next year, so prepare for that. But yeah, subscribe and like this video, comment as well too, and see you guys soon.